Hello, hello. Let me just make sure that my microphone is working here. All right. Looks like everything is working. Okay. All right. Hello and welcome to the virtual book launch of the final installment of the Eyes of Fate trilogy, The Crystal Door by the amazing and talented Colby Dunn. My name is JJ Kimmorist. I'm a fantasy, science fiction, and horror author and YouTuber, and I am so incredibly honored and excited to be the master of ceremonies for this book launch. So Colby will be joining us here momentarily, but I just wanted to start off by getting some housekeeping things out of the way first. First of all, I would like to welcome all of you to the launch and say thank you so much for coming. Second of all, I just want to make sure to remind you to mute your microphone while the launch is going on, unless you are speaking, just so that everything flows a little bit easier. But do make sure to utilize the chat we have going on here. I think you can see if you pull it off to the right side. We have a chat going on, and we will be doing a Q&A later on with Colby. So if you want to begin brainstorming some questions, just feel free to use the chat for that to post those questions when we get to it, and also just any general comments that you want to share. You can pre-order The Crystal Door right now on Amazon, and The Crystal Door will be available tomorrow, October 1st. I was lucky enough to get an advanced reader copy of The Crystal Door, and I must tell you that I just finished the final pages last night, and it definitely does not disappoint as the final book in this epic trilogy. There's so many unexpected turns, and I don't want to say any spoilers or anything, but just be prepared to go on a whole journey from beginning to end. So yes, make sure you pre-order The Crystal Door if you have not already. So tonight, after I introduce Colby, we will be doing he will be giving some insights about his process and experience writing the Eyes of Fate trilogy, and he will also be reading a short excerpt from The Crystal Door as well. Then we will open the floor to questions, and afterward we will also be concluding with a giveaway with a bunch of prizes, including signed copies of the entire trilogy. So yes, make sure you stay tuned all the way to the end if you want to win some prizes. All right, so I'm going to get started here just by introducing Colby. If you don't know him super well, if you don't know him personally, let me tell you a bit about him. So Colby has been writing in one way or another his entire life, but he set out to be an author about 10 years ago in 2010, after getting married. And after high school and preaching Christianity in Japan for 2 years, he was, for a while, still committed to being an illustrator until an interpreting job took him back overseas. It was there that he was alone with a lot of ideas and a lot of time, and thus he began writing. A few years of practice later, and he realized that this is something that he wanted to do. So knowing full well that his desire to begin this 3-part fantasy series while starting a family and while working full-time jobs would be a heavy task, he set out to learn the craft by attending numerous writing clinics, refining the process with author Holly Lissel, and devoting a lot of time to personal study. Over the 10-year span of creating these books, Colby also continued his study of martial arts, attending and completing instructor's college, and teaching both the Japanese sword style of Aikido and the Chinese Shaolin Kung Fu. So these philosophies and mechanics are something he tries to bake into his fictional fantasy worlds, which I believe he does very well. So now, 10 years, 3 children, 3 jobs, and 500,000 words later, his trilogy is complete with the release of The Crystal Door tomorrow, October 1st. Recently, the first book in his series, The Crimson Sun, has hit the top 10 list on Amazon in the epic fantasy category. Now, I don't know if many of you know, but as a writer, reaching the top 10 on any of Amazon's categories is a huge achievement. And I can't think of, a more fitting book to reach the top 10 on its own merit. The series is just a perfect balance of action, romance, beautiful writing, and just characters who really steal your heart, in my opinion. So that's, enough of me talking. Let me finally introduce the creator himself, Colby Dunn. Let's bring him in right now.
Hey, am I here?
You're here.
Hello.
Hey. Hello.
That.
Welcome. All right. Looks like we got a pretty good audience here too. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, look at that. We got what? 20 people in here. Hello, everybody.
Wow.
That's fantastic. Can you all hear me okay? Can you hear me okay, JJ?
Yeah, I can hear you great. Yeah.
Awesome.
Perfect. All right. So I have a few interview questions for you if you are ready to just jump right in.
Absolutely. And I see Rob here. Hey, Rob. Is this Rob from Australia? I think it is. People from Australia.
Wow, Australia. I wonder what time it is over there.
Yeah, what time is it? It's got to be something crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just 11 a.m.
Okay, not too bad.
That's awesome.
Okay, all right. So starting off, first question, I would like to know, how does it feel to be at the end of this decade-long project?
Oh, it feels good.
I bet.
Yeah, I had no idea what I was biting off to chew back when I started this series as my first kind of foray into writing. So I'm the kind of person, and my wife will attest to this if you ever talk to her about it. I get bored with things really easily. Or rather, I guess a better way to put it is I get excited about new things easily.
Mhm.
So having
Me too.
this stretch over the span of a decade really put me through the ringer. But I'm happy to be done with it and can move on with my life, move on with new projects.
Yeah, I can't imagine the feeling of, satisfaction and achievement and, finishing something this large in scope. It's not just your regular, single protagonist story. It encompasses a number of characters, and there's backstories, and it's all weaved together very well. And I can't imagine just the outline that you would have to do to do this trilogy. So it's really incredible.
It's a weird feeling for sure.
Yeah, I bet. For those who may be, a little bit unfamiliar with your work, could you explain a little bit, about the series and, what you can expect from the Crystal Door?
Absolutely. Yeah. So The Eyes of Fate is the name of the series. Fate being the deity of this world. Fate is not just a concept or whatever, is an actual god that kind of governs this world. So a lot of the themes sort of end up revolving around choice and the power of choice, and how much control do you really have over your destiny, and how much you can contest that, how much you can go up against what you're supposed to be doing. So that's kind of where the underlying ideas kind of come from. As far as the story itself, the plot, it starts off with the tyrannical queen invading the main characters' kingdoms and sort of forcing them out the door, right, into this quest, into this adventure to initially to repel her out of their country and fight for peace again. But as fantasy has it, right, as the more layers come off, you kind of discover that there's more to this war than first meets the eye, and it's very integrated with each of the characters' lives. And yeah, so as far as this book's concerned, if you've read the first two, it's definitely going to answer all your lingering questions, hopefully, most of them at least, and definitely delve into more of the past of some of these characters. We've kind of just been writing with them in the present, but the structure is broken a little bit, or it's a little different than the first two books in this one, where there's a lot of flashback sequences. So it was really fun to sort of dig into that side of it. So expect to see all your questions answered about the Dark Sage from and what's going on with him from the first two books. Caleb's father, which is the main character's father, and Palson, who's probably my favorite character. You get to really dig into him and see what's going on with him. So, yeah.
Yeah, I personally loved the flashbacks. And I'm a sucker for, the backstory. No character is just that character on the surface. I love seeing, what made them this way. I find that fascinating. So I really enjoyed the flashbacks in this book.
Oh, good. I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
Hopefully everybody does too.
Yeah.
Flashbacks are rough because sometimes it's like you by necessity, right? You have to break from the current action and take them somewhere else. You have to pause what's going on and jump backwards. And so it's a little bit of a risk, especially when it's throughout a whole book. So hopefully it worked.
Yeah, I mean, I think it gives it that like cinematic quality, which has become like more and more so what modern contemporary books are doing is more the cinematic way of cutting scenes and splicing them, in between each other, and the timeline might be, not exactly linear, but it makes sort of for more interesting read or watch, depending on what format you're talking about. But
so we got Team Powson representing in the chat too. I see. That's awesome.
Oh my gosh, I couldn't figure out how to change my name. I'm sorry, everyone. I am temp on this.
Okay, you're temp tonight.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Anyway, sorry to diverge there, but let's talk about the writing process for this book. What came easily, what were the challenges, and aside from doing a lot of flashbacks and learning more about the characters' backstories, what was different about this book compared to the first two?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, this one is longer than the other two for sure. In fact, after first draft, it was so the books 1 and 2 were around 130,000 words in their final form. I can't remember what their original drafts were, but this one's first draft ended up being 175,000. And then after editing and revision and all that, it got knocked down quite a bit, but it's definitely still the longest. And it was the first time for me as a writer to finish a series. So I had to figure out, okay, I got to make sure that I'm, wrapping this up in a satisfying way, and making sure each character gets their payoffs, and making sure, every villain that we hate dies in a good way or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Tying up all those loose ends was more pressure than I thought, even though I had a pretty good outline. There's more pressure than I anticipated. Like, oh man, what if this doesn't line up? What if it doesn't work? What am I going to do? So I would say the biggest challenge was juggling those plot lines. As you know, JJ, and for there may be one or two others in here that have read it already with early copies, but there's, I believe, 6 different plot lines going by the time we're well into book 3. 6 different point of views that it's switching between. And to juggle that and make sure the pacing is right, not only for each individual plot thread, but as they weave in and out of each other, just to make sure you're not left with one party for too long and wanting to know what's happening over here. That juggling act was really tough. That was probably the hardest part with this book.
Oh yeah, I bet. There's, and I feel like there's more than 6 at least point of view characters. There's a lot, and I enjoy being able to see from everyone's eyes too. Makes it more dynamic in a way. And yeah, like you said, so having to clean everything up by the end and make it satisfying for the reader. Was there anything like you completely did not expect and end up changing hugely from your outline, or you stuck pretty close to the outline?
Yeah, that's a good one too. And it's funny.
No spoilers though. Sorry, I don't want
spoilers. I'm trying to be very careful what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. There's
specifically a few people in here that have read the first 2 and are just kind of waiting for the third. So I'll be really careful. But it is funny because I wrote the first draft, which is where the bones of everything kind of got cemented in, like a year and a half, or gosh, almost 2 years ago, I think now. So it's weird just how long that process takes. I'm trying to recall. There were definitely some surprises. A lot of it happens in revision. That's, for most authors, at least from what I understand, the revision is where the magic happens. Your first draft, you just kind of barf up and get it down on paper, right? And then from there, you really take a step back and look at it and say, okay, what's working and what's not? And that's where those kind of epiphanies hit you. So there were definitely a few characters that took turns that I didn't think they would. And I don't like it when authors say that their characters write themselves to the point where it's like, you're powerless. Oh, I didn't know they were going to do that. I wish they didn't have to die. It's like, I get that, but you have to be in control because you have to deliver a good reader experience at the end of the day, no matter what you want or your fictional characters want. So I tried and keep those surprises in check and direct them where they needed to go.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, it's hard to say more without giving spoilers. So we'll leave it at that.
Like, I just better stop talking.
All right. So were there any people or things from real life that you know drew inspiration from for characters or plot points in this book?
Yeah, for sure. And I think more than anything I've written so far, this book showed me how much you don't notice of yourself that you put into every character.
Mm.
And it's funny because my wife's on here and she says that Layla had a lot of revision in the last book. And that's true. She had a ton of changes happen with her plot thread throughout. And the reason I bring that up now is because most people have probably seen this already, but the main characters are Caleb and Layla, and I'm Colby. My wife's Lola. Of course, our names are about as far as the similarities go. Layla has red hair, just like my wife does. But other than that, so some of the names I just kind of pulled just for fun, just kind of as Easter eggs. But there is one new character in this book named Micah, and he's directly pulled from my buddy Micah, and he's been a good friend of mine for a long time. So again, sort of just a play on the name, but Micah's a big dude in real life, and he shares some similarities with this new character, so that was fun. And I've heard that Team Powson, is a lot like myself. I don't know if I would say that because our lives are really different. Of course, I don't have a tragic life like he does, but I could see myself reacting a lot of ways. If what happened to him happened to me, I could see myself reacting in a similar way.
Yeah, I think a lot of people actually would probably, in all honesty. Yeah. Okay. Well, cool. That's yeah, I think it's hard to sometimes separate yourself from your characters, because at some point, I mean, they are all iterations of yourself to some degree. I mean, obviously, imagination, creativity, and putting yourself in other people's shoes is going to be a big part of it. But at the same time, when you're really trying to get the true characters feelings across, at some point those were your feelings at some point in your life, when you were angry or upset, or like those are your memories that you're putting to the page. So yeah, definitely, I think a lot of people may not realize how much characters, even the evil ones, are aspects of the writer.
Yeah, it's a struggle to make that separation because you want them to feel different, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So talking about characters, you include, a large cast of these dynamic characters, and, you write from a number of character perspectives, like we talked about. Do you have a favorite character point of view to write from?
Oh, let's see. My answer would have been Powson for sure, because Team Powson for sure. Something that I found interesting is early on, I liked writing particular ones, but now in book 3, I kind of liked all of them. I know that sounds like a cop-out answer, but they were all in such different places in this book than they started in the first book. And that's very intentional. The first book, it's very black and white. These are the good guys. These are the bad guys over here. They don't really, merge at all. But by the third book, as you know, the line is kind of gone, and there's all sorts of crossing over between that line. And so they were all in such different places. It was almost like writing new characters in this book. So I really liked them all, but I think if I had to choose, I mean, I have to choose Powson.
Okay. All right. A fellow Slytherin in the house, maybe.
Maybe it's Craig, because he said the villains should have been based on him.
I heard something one of my actor friends told me, is that actors love playing the villain for some reason. I don't know why. I guess it's just more fun. So maybe there's part that's
maybe Craig
more fun to write the villain. Yeah. All right. Well, now that Eyes of Fate is all wrapped up, are you feeling sad? You feel like you're leaving these characters behind, or you ready to move on? And what's next for you? If you have any ideas so far.
Oh, I'm so ready to move on.
Okay.
There's definitely a piece of me that where these books is my first go for a fantasy trilogy. So there is definitely some kind of some bittersweetness there, but I'm excited to get on to fresh projects. I've mentioned this to a few people, but I've already got my next project's first draft completed. It's a novella, so wow. It's nothing as big as these. probably be 40 to 50,000 words, but it's a novella that's a low fantasy, which is a lesser known genre in the fantasy world. It's kind of a fantasy world, but it doesn't really center on the world building and the magic and stuff as much. So it's a low fantasy social commentary, I guess you could say. It was a really out there idea that I just kind of latched onto and ended up banging it out in just a couple months. So I'm really excited to get that out, probably the beginning of next year, if all goes well. And then from there, probably jump into another fantasy series, with the plan being shorter books so they can come out in quicker succession.
All right. Yeah, no, I'm definitely intrigued by this novella. I'm excited for. You have any idea? I know it's hard to say, I'm sure. Yeah, and plus you're very busy, but yeah, have any idea when that will be final, ready for the reader?
I'm hoping by like February is kind of what I'm targeting right now. Yeah, it's always kind of torturous to throw a date of any kind out there when you're in a writing project, because sometimes it's like, oh, wow, I finished that so way faster than I thought. And sometimes it's like, oh, dang, I need an extra year. So, but I'm hoping early next year.
Okay, great. I'm looking forward to that. Exciting. And yeah, I'm sure it's such a relief too to write something shorter too. So
yes, that was very refreshing to get one idea out and within a few months be like, I'm done with this idea. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, after spending 10 years, writing this trilogy, I can imagine you're ready for new, fresh waters. So yes, that's exciting.
So ready. Oh, thank you.
All right.
The free short story was awesome. Thanks.
Oh, I still haven't read that yet. I need to get cracking. All right. So those are all the preliminary questions I have right now. I believe you have prepared a reading excerpt. Is that right?
That's right. I have.
Right.
I'm by no means a professional narrator or voice actor or anything like that. But I do have, there's the print book. This is the first printed book, and it's a proof copy. So it even has a dumb banner on it. So this is the very first one. But yeah, I've got an excerpt here, and I'm going to have my old man glasses on so I can see it. But just to preface it, right, I get Towson's kind of the theme of this meeting, it seems. But it will be from one of his sections. And it's not really spoilery, because if you've even started in a few chapters into the first book, you know that Towson's history is a little bit tragic, and he's gone through some stuff. And you kind of don't know exactly what happened up to this point. So in this book, as we mentioned before now, that you kind of start to dig into that. Throughout books 1 and 2, he keeps mentioning his old sword master, Visero, and that he's learned his techniques from this sword master that wanders around. So this is the scene where he meets him. So I will just dive right in and read through this. I think it'll take about 10 minutes. So we'll see if we can get through it.
All right.
All right. So Powson his tragedy has struck, and he's wandering by himself, and he's in a really dark place right now. He's come to a cliffside, which he's sitting on, contemplating what he wants to do with his life, whether he wants to jump or not. So really dark place, really sad. But this is what happens. He loosened his grip on the rock beside him. "Will you not jump?" a voice suddenly said from behind. What may have surprised an average person into an accidental death drifted into Powson's consciousness slowly. He had thought he heard many voices over the last week, but this one was clearly real. Slowly, drearily, Powson turned and saw a curious man standing as still as the tree beside him. The stranger was tall and thin and stood with a straight, resolute back. On his head, he wore a tall hat featuring a uniquely broad brim, which overshadowed all but his chin, which jutted out a bit. Long, graying hair spilled over his shoulders. About him was a concealing robe and cloak, opening just enough to reveal a large belt buckle and pants tucked into tall black boots, faded from travel. On his back, he wore a thin sword so long it nearly touched the ground, with the shaft of the handle peeking out from above his right shoulder. He wore dark leather gloves that extended past his wrists. The odd fellow stood there patiently awaiting an answer. The words of his question were not harsh or malicious, but flat and devoid of feeling. Just an honest, curious question. Well? Palsen opened his mouth to respond, but found he did not know the answer. He turned back to the precipice and looked down. Was he going to jump? It's what he was considering, wasn't it? So you're not, the man asked, reading his mind. I don't know, Palsen muttered. Yes, you do. Confused at the odd reply, Palsen turned back to him again. What? The man did not move from his statuesque position, but replied in a soft tone that somehow commanded respect and spoke of authority. You do know, he repeated. If you were going to jump, you would have already, and yet here you are. So the question is not if you are going to jump to your death, but why will you not? Who are you? Palsen asked, ignoring the perplexing statement. Some call me the Wanderer, the man said. But if you cannot solve the riddle of my question, then my name or anyone else's no longer matter, as you will be broken at the bottom of that cliff. The question is not for me, but for you. Why will you not jump? Palsen felt another well of sporadic emotion building within him, though he knew not why. The man's words were certainly not oppressive. He grimaced, holding back a sob, and looked at the ground halfway between his inquirer and the cliff. Eleanor, Maya, my wife, my baby, he muttered, moving his hands as if he were cradling something small. They are not my question, said the man calmly, still unmoving beneath his shady brim. His voice grew sterner. Why? Why do you not jump? Because, Palsen attempted, furrowing his brow. Because I can't bring myself to. He whimpered in shame at hearing the words leave his lips. And why is that? Palsen shook his head at the queer string of pressing questions and shrugged. I'm a coward. Wrong, the man answered matter-of-factly. Try again. Palsen was at a loss for words, but eventually, after a long moment of silence, started to think harder, if just to be rid of the odd man. I can't do it because I'm afraid? The man nodded as if he had given a correct answer. Indeed, fear is very different than cowardice. So what are you afraid of? Palsen wasn't sure, but something about the man's cutting sincerity compelled him to dig deeper. He thought for a moment, attempting to piece the puzzle together and put it into words. The satyr was all he could provide. The murderers of your family? Palsen nodded. You resent them, even hate them. I understand. But neither of these things are fear. What are you afraid of? An answer suddenly came to Palsen, but he did not have time to consider its import until he had already spoken it. I'm afraid that it's not my time yet. Ah, now you are being honest, the man said, with another nod, but his questions did not cease. Why would it not be your time? Palsen did not have to ponder long before he remembered something his mother had said shortly before she died, in a room in his own homestead. He could still hear the words and feel her shaking hand on him as she spoke them. My darling Thomas, I'm so proud of you. You've always been deserving of happiness, and now it will be so. You will do great things, my darling boy, great things. Palsen wiped the tears away and provided an answer he felt was right. It's not my time because they would not want it to be, because I will do great things. There was silence, long enough for Palsen to turn and see if his questioner was still there. He was, though he had stepped away from the tree and had folded his gloved arms in front of him. The shade beneath the large brim of his hat still hid his dark eyes, but Palsen could tell he was thinking. Very well, the man said at length. Now that you know you will not jump, move away from there. Stand up. Palsen obeyed, the logic clear to him now, as though the man had just showed him some mathematical proof of the validity of life on a sheet of parchment. Come here, the man said in a voice still gentle, but even more commanding than before. Palsen began to wobble toward him, but stopped when the stranger retrieved the long, thin sword from his back and held it before him in one hand as if they were to duel. Palsen looked him up and down hollowly. The man nodded in approval. If I were to attack you now, would you run? He asked. Palsen shook his head. You do not fear death, as you have already proven. Palsen nodded. Fear makes a man human, he went on. People need it to stay alive, to guide them through danger and to connect with those around them. To root fear out of a man is a terrible thing, as you know all too well. It transforms him. Palsen nodded again. But what's done is done, and for better or worse, you are now left with a tool that few men possess, a key to a door few men find. Fearlessness. If I were to attack, I believe you would not run, but you would also not live. I can run quickly, Palsen said. not in challenge, but in reason. The man stood for a moment, then jolted with an inhuman speed. Palsen thought he was seeing some sort of an illusion. Although the stranger hardly seemed to move from his place in the dirt, the thin sword in his hand flicked about in a whirl of arcs as though he held the end of a whip, lashing of its own accord. When he was motionless again, a breath later, the dead tree beside him split apart into 3 pieces. The angles and the pieces cut and the precise cuts through its brittle trunk orchestrated perfectly so that the remains fell away from him in half circle, like slaves bowing to their lord. You would die, the man reiterated with new credibility, his voice still calm. He went on as Palsen gawked in awe. But it does not have to be so. In your current state, this newfound tool is dangerous. It would be wasted if you do not learn to control it, to let it work for you instead of against you. That is when you will achieve true power. Palsen became aware of the weight of the glass box of trinkets in his pocket, as though they were suddenly calling out to him. You would teach me? The man paused as if to think before giving a final answer. Yes. But why? I'm nobody. Nobodies are the most prepared learners, the stranger replied. I have seen many broken men in my time. Some I have helped, some I have not. But I will not always wander the hidden lands. I must begin passing on my knowledge. It is what my master did and his before him. You are perhaps just the nobody I needed to find. Come with me and you may yet do great things. For the first time in many, many days, Palsen felt something. He was not sure if it was one isolated emotion, but it was emotion in general, and that in and of itself was a sign that there was something to this man he should heed. He was unconsciously nodding. Now that you will not die, the man said, my name is relevant. I am called Vasero. Vasero? Vasero the Wanderer. Palsen had heard the name before, though he had no history to attach to it. All right, he replied. Placing a boot on one of the felled tree branches, Vasero reached down and broke off a crooked limb about 3 spans long and tossed it to Palsen, who barely managed to catch it. This is your weapon. It will break and be replaced with another until you can learn to cut and parry properly. In 3 months' time, we will determine if you are worthy to carry a real blade. Palsen nodded and examined the gnarled limb with reverence, as though he were holding one of the sister blades of fate. He was less than enthusiastic, his numbed soul reacting like a child obeying the will of his parents without knowing why. But if he would have been looking, he would have seen Vasero smile in approval under the shade of his brim. It is impossible for a prideful man to learn, Vasero reiterated, as he turned and began walking away from the cliff without warning. The more a man is broken, the more potential he has in body and mind to rebuild anew after a stronger and better fashion. We build the new foundation from fragments of your former life and discard the rest. We take what is useful from the past, but we don't allow the dark times to rule the future. Palsen listened and trailed his stick through the dirt as he followed, his head hanging low. Without turning, Vasero shouted unexpectedly, "That is your weapon. Treat it with respect." The stick jumped up to Palsen's shoulder immediately, and he quickened his pace in surprise as he hastened to catch up to the long-strided swordmaster. And another thing, Vasero said, this time stopping and turning to look his new pupil in the eyes. He waited until Palsen met his gaze fully. For the first time, he saw Vasero's eyes under the darkness of his hat. They were narrow and sharp and gleamed with a piercing kind of power that made him feel safe and uncomfortable at the same time. If you come with me to seek revenge for your family, your journey ends here. If vengeance is what you seek, the road off the cliff's edge will be faster, for it will lead to the same destination. Vengeance will destroy a man quicker than any saber's edge. He paused for emphasis. Do you understand? Palsen looked back at the cliff, then returned his gaze to the tall, stern man before him and nodded. Another long moment of silence drove the point deeper, then Vasero turned back to the horizon before them. Then let us begin.
Skylar says, boom, mic drop. I totally agree.
My first experience narrating. You first saw it here.
Wonderful. Yes. No, and I love that you picked that passage. It's such a perfect glimpse into, the Paulson before he's this, this villainous character sort of. And I think it's, also the perfect metaphor for his character as well, him standing at a cliff's edge, because he is always kind of, about to go one side or the other. And you could see how easily it could have been for him to be a completely different person if he had just made one slightly different choice, or, had one slightly different thing happen to him. He's kind of always on the precipice of good and evil, and we don't really see that quite as much until this book as well. So
that's true. That's very true.
Yeah.
He definitely has to make a pivotal choice later again.
Yeah, no, so yeah, I love this passage. It is very also when, the more moving ones, as far as the back, again, I don't want to do any spoilers, but the backstory of the characters, his is the one that's, like just heart-wrenching. Oh man.
Oh, Rebecca Donaldson's in the chat. She is my 3rd grade teacher. And she
wow.
pretty much can be the one I attribute my love for writing and reading back to her. She got me started way back in elementary school.
Oh, that's great. We all have that one teacher that just inspired us.
Absolutely. I love her. She's amazing.
Yes, teachers are the best. All right. We are about to open the floor to questions. So let me hold on one sec here. Make sure I didn't miss any already. Make sure you guys put your questions in the chat here. See, I did have one too. I was going to ask. Hold on. Did I write it down? Sorry. Oh yeah, I was going to ask. So about your writing style too, which we got to see a little bit of just a moment ago, but you definitely have this very vivid prose to your writing style, and it's I like to think of it as like this kind of like this happy marriage that meets in between, like Tolkien's flowery style and like Brandon Sanderson's like straightforward, easy to grasp style. It's sort of right there in the middle. Is that something that you kind of strove for in developing yourself as a writer, or is that something that just kind of like came naturally to you?
Yes, thank you for that, by the way. I'm glad to hear that that's how it comes across.
Yeah.
As a huge Tolkien fan, I've got my Hobbit poster down there and everything. Right, a Strider, Aragorn sword right here. I love Tolkien, but we all know he's very hard to read. The fantasy, he had basically invented the genre long time ago where there weren't the same rules as there are now.
Yeah.
He was a linguist first and foremost, so I definitely didn't want to go there if I even was capable, which I'm not. But I do like to have that middle ground. My goal is always to have epic fantasy be accessible, because it isn't always accessible. Down there on my shelf, you can kind of see about right here, there's the Wheel of Time, and my siblings, if they're in here, they've heard me talk about this. Those books are huge and they're not necessarily hard to follow. There's just a lot. So I try and strike that balance of you're still in an epic fantasy world, but it's really accessible and you can just kind of blast through it and enjoy it.
Awesome. Yes, that's a great way to approach it too, and I think you do very, very well with that.
Thank you. Tony's preaching down there because he got me started in the Wheel of Time. Thanks a lot, Tony.
Thanks a lot for thousands of hours of entertainment.
Yeah.
And thousands of pages. All right. Let's see. We have a few questions here. Hold on. Where did it go? Are you personally team Layla or team Alastra? Lola wants to know.
I'm team Layla all the way.
Team Layla.
It doesn't read quite that way if you're kind of into the second book, but I promise I'm team Layla 100%.
I was a little bit team Alastra for a while there.
She was one of the funnest characters to write. She's definitely one of the most colorful characters in the book. So she's awesome. But I mean, Caleb and Layla forever.
All right. Oh, Jenna's here. Jenna says, which actor would you want to play Caleb in the TV series?
Well, if anybody's seen me attempt to act, you'd cry out, no, please no. Absolutely not. I'm the worst actor on the face of the planet. I would never imagine any kind of world, any kind of dark timeline we'd be in where I'd be acting in this movie.
So then if you got to choose an actor, then would you have anyone in mind or anyone you visualize?
Oh, that is a good question. There is, and maybe somebody can help me. I don't know her name. The only actress I've ever seen or actor that I've seen have been like, oh, that's kind of how I pictured my character. Actually, there's two. Palson I always saw looking like Tom Hiddleston for some reason.
Oh, I can see that. Yep.
Loki, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of how I picture him. Those sharp features, sharp nose, long hair. But the other one, I don't know her name. She's in Westworld. She's one of the main characters in Westworld, and she has kind of she's got a foreign name. Anyway, I always pictured Leothrin like her. If you IMDb it, you'll know when you see her who I'm talking about.
Okay, I think I know who you're talking about. I
Wish I
also
remembered
don't
her
know
name.
her name. Yeah, I don't know her name either.
The guy from Blue's Clues, says Julie. That's me. I'm Steve. Everyone says I look like Steve from Blue's Clues.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. Do you get that often?
I do. Julie's
Really?
from work. I work at Discover Card as well, and that's kind of the thing at Discover, that I'm Steve.
All right, let's see. Skylar Miller says, you have a very unique magic system where memories are offered up to the deities. Oh yes, I also find this part very interesting too. Do you plan to revisit this universe or theme in future books, or do you plan to expand into completely new worlds / magic systems?
That's a great one. I plan to totally branch out and expand away from that. Again, being my first sort of foray into fantasy writing and writing in general, I really feel like as an author and a self-critic that the magic system was not well fleshed out, and I wish I could go back and kind of rework it. I like kind of where it ended up being, but it was very light surface level magic system, and I really want to leave that behind now and start something fresh.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I love that price that you pay for the magic, because I think a lot of the times, you have to put a limit on the character's powers, and so there's always going to be a price to pay for the magic. And I losing your memories is one that I actually hadn't really seen. I don't think anyone do before, so I think that was really, really unique.
Well, thank you.
In that sense. So yeah, I'm sad to hear we won't be hearing more of it, but I'm excited for what you come up with next.
Well, thanks.
Let's see. Ethan says, if you had to live one day as a villain from the third book, who would it be and why?
As a villain from the third book, and without spoilers, oh boy. Let's see, because you probably know this is a very spoiler-ridden territory here, because all the lines shift, like I mentioned. Marmius is pretty cool. He's been through both books, and he's just a really interesting character as well that we get to explore a little more. So I think living a day in his heavy armor and with his special abilities would be kind of cool.
Except you only have one eye.
That's true. Only have one eye.
And you're kind of ugly too. Oh, but it's just one day, so that's okay.
That's right. We can get through it for 24 hours.
Yeah. All right. Rob says, if you could pick a mythical beast or animal to have as a pet, what would it be and why?
Oh man, mythical animal. I mean, dragon, right? I mean, it's cliche, but dragons are the coolest. I got my dragon right here. That would be my pet. Just
all right.
50 times larger.
All right. Let's see. What type of sing-song accent do you picture Leothrin to have? Asks Skylar.
Oh, I always read in my head sort of a Russian accent. I'm not a linguist by any means, but yeah, I always, when I kind of was reading in my head and writing it in my head, I always kind of read her lines in a Russian accent for some reason.
I can see that. I imagined her maybe like some kind of Swedish or like Scandinavian descent for some reason.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Which perfectly matches the casting from Westworld, right?
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. All right. Paul wants to know, what is the biggest lesson you've learned from writing this trilogy, and how will you carry it on to your next projects?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I think the biggest lesson I learned from this trilogy would probably be to really, there's a principle that I was aware of when I was writing it, but I don't think I truly learned it until just recently. Kind of goes back to the previous question about the magic system, is to really think through an idea and integrate it into every facet of the world when you're world building. Right? If you have a magic system where you can summon water or whatever from your hands, you'll never thirst again, right? Like you can have water everywhere you go now. And that's something that like you just have to make sure the magic systems and the culture and anything you bring to a fictional world is really fully integrated into every aspect of that world. And I think I'm really going to try and do a better job of that this next time around, and just really drive that home.
Yeah, some people have they spend years writing the world, writing the magic system. They have whole like Bibles that they wrote, just all world and magic. I mean, that's a little bit too much for me, but like to some extent, you do, like you said, have to think through every single thing. I mean, even just the simplest, the day-to-day things are going to be different if there's, magic involved in daily life. So
right. And I mean, I've got 40 pages of notes and back history and kind of all that Bible stuff, the world Bible that you have to write. But I feel like it goes beyond that too, right? You have to just really be in that world. And I feel like I can do a better job at that this next time around.
awesome. Well, looking forward to it. Ethan wants to know, do you struggle to kill off characters? Do lots of characters die in book 3?
Everyone dies. There's no one left at the end. Spoiler, sorry. I actually don't have too hard of a time killing off characters. I'm in between. In the writing world, we call it a pantser, which is you just fly by the seat of your pants when you're writing. You just go with whatever you go with. And then you have an outliner or a plotter that you outline every single thing. I'm somewhere in the middle. But things like character deaths and big plot twists, I usually have worked out before I write anything. So I know well in advance that a character is going to die or what's going to happen to them, with few exceptions. So I think maybe it's just that I have a lot of time to get used to the idea, so that once I get to that scene, I can really write it and do it justice, and kind of the emotion side of it's gone already. But definitely rereading it after the product's finished and I'm just kind of rereading it as a reader. Yeah, there's definitely some hard scenes in this book. There was some hard scenes to reread for sure.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so I want to make sure we have time for our drawings. So
yeah,
I'm going to go ahead and just do a little recap here before we get to the prizes. All right, let me see here. Okay. Recapping, the Crystal Door comes out tomorrow, October 1st. Pre-orders are live at Amazon.com for both ebooks and paperbacks. Feel free to visit colbydunn.com to subscribe to his author mailing list, where you'll get project updates, offers, and freebies, including a free short story, which we mentioned a little bit earlier. If you are curious about me at all, you can find me at Kimmorist.com. From there are links to my mailing list and my author YouTube page, as well as my secondary YouTube channel, where I kind of mix my passion for storytelling along with my love for heavy metal music. Anyway, yes. Let's move on to the giveaways. Colby, what would you like to start with first?
So let me pull this up here real quick. I'll share my screen. We've got some visuals here so we can know what's going on. Hopefully you guys can see this come up.
I see it.
All right, perfect. And I'm going to move this over as well. Excellent. So first up, we'll just start with the big one. We've got prize number 1 is the Eyes of Fate trilogy signed paperbacks. And they come with these awesome little custom bookmarks. Here they are. There's one for the Crystal Door. So they're really cool. We'll be sending those out, and well, I guess I'll get to the details at the end. Let's just go ahead and draw it. All right.
Here we go.
Let me get the chat up here. And I'll grab the participants as well. Okay. Well, that's funny. So the first one goes to Jenna Parks.
All right.
That's awesally
That's my sister. If you guys don't know, that's my sister, which is funny because she actually needs them, because she loaned her first 2 copies out to a friend shortly before she moved here to Tennessee. And so she was heartbroken because she knew that she wouldn't be getting them back, and they're signed and everything. But she loaned them to a friend who really wanted to read them. And so this is awesome.
That's perfect. They're lost in a ditch somewhere here in Utah. Well, and Jenna she bought them very early on, which I'm so appreciative of. And since then, they've been updated. Books 1 and 2 have been updated to second editions, which have a really cool map at the first, which the ebooks don't have. So for all of you reading the ebooks, the physical copies do have maps in them. And there's all kinds of good stuff going into the second editions. It's the same thing essentially, but there's some good extras in there. So congrats to Jenna. That's awesome.
All right.
All right. So the next one, let me change my slide here. So it's a copy of the third book, the new book, with also signed, of course, and the bookmark to go with it. So that's really cool. And that ends up being Salazar's iPhone. And that's hilarious because that's my sister.
All about the sisters.
So as a bonus for mine, I guess I can hand deliver it next time I see it. Hand deliver.
Yay!
That's pretty hilarious, actually. Okay, and then we've got the whole trilogy in ebook form, which is super cool. So let me go ahead and do that one. There it is. That would be Rob, Mr. Rob in Australia.
All right. Friends all over the world.
Right? It's super cool. And I'm going to be taking some notes here just so I can remember. So Jenna's the trilogy. The other sister is the third book. And then Rob is the ebook trilogy. And I actually have, hey, there's Rob. I actually have one more. I'm going to go backwards here. One more of the complete set to give out. So this is one more of prize 1, which is the whole paperback trilogy signed. And that would be Craig Stratton. Is who it churned up for me. And yes, Julie says, will you sign the other books for me when I buy them? Of course I will. I will sign any books that anybody wants me to sign, always, for sure. Yeah, Rob, he's like, too bad. It's a good thing you don't have to ship to Australia. I would have paid it for sure. That is awesome. And so the last thing I'll throw out then before I'll throw it back to you, JJ, is if you are one of the winners, to claim your prizes, just email with the subject winner to colbydunnauthor@gmail.com. With your first and last name, your mailing address, if it's applicable, if you have physical prizes, and if you have any signature preferences, whether you want it on the cover, the inside cover, no signatures at all, a message, what the message is, anything you want preference-wise, let me know in there as well.
All right. Where are we? Oh, yes. Wow, we are right.
Pick it up when you see me.
Have a great summer. Oh, that's funny. Ags. Oh, gosh.
That's amazing.
All right. Wow, we are like right on time. We are on schedule here.
Look at us.
Well, that's great. Okay, well, thank you so much for everyone coming out. Thank you for joining us. It was such an honor to be hosting you all here. And yeah, thank you so much for your questions and your comments. And yes, I had a great time.
Thank you Colby, so much for doing this.
Yeah, final thoughts. Yeah, no problem. Anytime. I'll be here.
Yeah, and so as far as last thoughts, just to thank you to everybody, everyone in here, plus many more that are not in here, have been so supportive. Just so awesome from the very beginning, from this journey 10 years ago. And I couldn't do it without you guys. It just makes it all worth it when even just a couple people say they read it and they loved it and they liked it or whatever. And so I'm just really grateful for everybody, everybody's support and love and encouragement. So thank you to everyone. Enjoy the book.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. We'll cut off the meeting here in just a minute, but appreciate everyone. Bye-bye.